Okay, let's get straight into it. There's been a really critical situation unfolding in Kashmir. We need to talk about the attack in Pahalgam on April 22nd, 2025. It's demanding our focus. So today, we're going to try and unpack what happened, maybe get into the why, and definitely look at the immediate fallout. We're drawing mainly on news reports here, trying to piece together the core elements, and it's important to start by acknowledging the human cost. It's just tragic. At least 26 tourists killed in the Baisaran meadow near Pahalgam, and among them, a foreign national from Nepal. It just highlights how indiscriminate this violence was.
It really does. It's a grim event, no question. Really marks the deadliest assault targeting civilians, specifically in Kashmir, for quite some years.
Mhm.
The details that are coming out, they pinpoint April 22nd, 2025. The location is the Baisaran Meadow, which is near Pahalgam in South Kashmir's Anantnag district. And the nature of it, gunmen just opened fire on tourists directly, which led to this devastating loss, at least 26 lives, mostly Indian tourists, but as you said, many wounded too. And that death of the Nepali national, it just underscores the wider reach of a tragedy like this.
And then there's the claim of responsibility. The Resistance Front, or TRF, has apparently claimed it. Now, understanding this group is probably key. Reports are suggesting TRF is likely an offshoot of Lashkar-e-Taiba. That's a group known to operate from Pakistan, right?
That's correct.
And Indian police, they've identified 3 suspects already, and 2 are thought to be Pakistani nationals. That seems fast.
And significant.
It is significant. That alleged link to Lashkar-e-Taiba, it suggests a potential continuation of, established extremist ideologies,
Yeah.
maybe even operational links. And that's obviously a major concern for regional security. Now, the TRF's stated motive, according to the reports, it centers on the settlement of over 85,000 people they're calling outsiders. They're claiming this is engineered demographic change.
Demographic change, okay.
Yeah, it's a narrative they're pushing. I mean, while they try to get this sort of political justification, the act itself targeting innocent tourists, it's just unequivocally abhorrent. When they talk about demographic change, they're likely pointing towards recent policies or perhaps perceived shifts in the region's population makeup since, the Article 370 changes.
Right, right. So let's unpack the immediate impact. You said it's the deadliest attack on civilians recently, and the timing peaks spring tourist season. That feels deliberate, doesn't it? Calculated.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Calculated to inflict maximum damage. Not just lives lost, terrible as that is,
Yeah.
but also aimed squarely at the vital tourism sector.
So what have we seen in terms of immediate consequences?
Well, the response has been pretty swift and on multiple fronts. Security, first off, has been significantly heightened across the Kashmir Valley. We're talking more checkpoints, more frequent frisking, deployment of special forces units. And alongside that, there's a large joint operation, Army, CRPF, that's the Central Reserve Police Force, and the J&K Police. They're conducting a combing operation in about a 5-kilometer radius around the attack site. The focus is clearly on finding the perpetrators.
And beyond the boots on the ground, the diplomatic fallout seems pretty intense already. India has strongly condemned it, and reports say they're directly blaming Pakistan for ongoing support of terrorism.
Yes.
And that's led to a downgrading of diplomatic ties, but also suspending the Indus Waters Treaty. That feels like a huge step.
It really does. That treaty has been in place for decades, governing water sharing. Suspending it signals, well, just how seriously India views this attack and the alleged Pakistani connection. It's a major lever to pull.
And on the ground for people there?
Well, the impact is being felt. Airlines have reportedly increased flights out of Srinagar. Understandably, tourists want to leave. And there was also a Kashmir Band. That's a general strike or shutdown called by the Jammu and Kashmir National Conference political party on April 23rd. Reports suggest it saw widespread participation, which kind of reflects a broad local condemnation of this violence.
Okay, so that brings us to maybe the harder part, the broader context. Why does something like this happen? We need to look at the history of terrorism and the insurgency in Kashmir. It didn't just start now.
No, not at all. The reports often remind us this goes back to 1989, and it really escalated through the 1990s.
And the initial drivers weren't exactly the same as they are now, were they?
That's a crucial point. The evolution of the ideologies it's quite striking. Initially, a lot of the focus was on calls for Kashmiri independence. But over time, you see this significant shift. Pan-Islamic influences became much more prominent. And with that came persistent allegations of support, funding, and fighters from Pakistan. That ideological shift really shaped the kinds of militant groups that emerged.
Right, and we've seen several key groups over the decades. You had the JKLF Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, initially more nationalist, wanting independence.
All right.
Then groups like Hizbul Mujahideen, which had links to Jamaat Islami. And then the big names, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed.
Mhm.
And now, more recently, this group we're discussing, TRF. How have their methods, their tactics changed over that time?
The tactics have definitely evolved. We've seen assassinations, political figures, civilians, direct attacks on security forces, bombings, even hostage-taking. Now, specifically targeting tourists, like this recent attack, it's been comparatively less frequent than attacks on security forces or, say, political targets. But it's not unprecedented. We have to remember the kidnapping of foreign tourists, also near Pahalgam back in 1995, and the horrifying massacre during the Amarnath Yatra pilgrimage in 2000.
Right.
So while less common, these past incidents show that tourists have been targets before. This attack is a chilling echo of that.
But there are some recent trends suggesting maybe a tactical shift again. Reports indicate local recruitment into militancy might be down.
Yes, that seems to be the assessment, a decline in locals joining the ranks.
But at the same time, a continued, maybe even concerning, presence of foreign fighters, often with better weapons.
Exactly. And with perhaps less local support, particularly in urban centers, and facing increased pressure from security forces in those areas, it looks like some groups might be adapting, shifting their focus towards, well, softer targets like civilians in more remote areas.
And why do that? Why the shift to remote areas and civilians now?
It could be a few things driving it. As I said, reduced local support in towns makes operating harder, finding shelter harder. Remote areas might seem like easier targets, fewer security personnel maybe, easier to inflict casualties, and importantly, generate fear. Plus, attacks on civilians, especially tourists, hit the economy hard. They project an image of instability that serves the militants' broader aims, undermining normalcy.
And connecting this back to the bigger picture, decades of this conflict, the terrorism, the
Yeah.
cumulative impact on Kashmir is just devastating.
Absolutely. You have the immense loss of life, civilians caught in the crossfire, security forces, the militants themselves. You have the displacement of communities, the Kashmiri Pandits, their exodus in the early 1990s is still a very deep wound. And just the ongoing disruption to everyday life, to the economy, particularly tourism, which is so crucial there.
Yeah.
It's had a profound, lasting negative impact.
So bringing it back to this specific event, the attack on April 22nd, 2025, it really feels like a grim milestone, a worrying escalation.
It does. It absolutely does. It's further inflamed tensions in what's already an incredibly sensitive region. And as the news reports are making clear, the immediate focus, the top priority right now, is apprehending those responsible for this horrific act.
And beyond just catching the perpetrators, there's clearly this ongoing assessment of the wider implications, isn't there? This attack is bound to have significant consequences for security in the region, and, as we saw with the diplomatic response, for the already very strained India-Pakistan relationship.
No doubt. It raises serious questions about the potential for further instability, and frankly, about the long-term prospects for any kind of peace process.
So just to kind of wrap up where we've gotten to, we've looked at the specific, tragic details of the April 22nd attack. We've discussed the immediate response of security, diplomatic fallout, the local reaction.
And we've tried to place it within that long, complex history of the insurgency and terrorism in Kashmir, which is just essential context, really.
Absolutely. This deep dive, it really hammers home how interconnected these immediate events are with those deeper, long-running issues. So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. Given this history, the evolving tactics we've discussed, and that stated motive about demographic change, what might the long-term effects of this specific attack be on the region's already fragile stability, and on any potential path towards a lasting peace?
Yeah, it really forces you, doesn't it, to look past the headlines, past the immediate horror, and grapple with these really deep, complex layers. You've got the historical grievances, the geopolitics playing out, and always, always the profound human cost.